Hello, beautiful people. I want to connect with you again, heart to heart, by just sharing what's been coming up for me the past 24 hours and how I reflected on the astrology or just my insights and reflections about planetary exaltation. And so, as I'm sure you saw when you clicked on the video, the title here or the topic is going to be about planetary exaltation and how it might not necessarily mean that it's a good thing or always a good thing. And it doesn't mean it's a bad thing either. So I'm going to go in deep with that a little bit. And first, I want to share just how I'm feeling right now at this moment, how I've been feeling. And due to finally accepting a truth of mine, my personal truth in the nature of relationships, I am in this space of feeling really disappointed, feeling sad, and just a fear of being alone, a fear of repeating similar patterns, which will lead to me, you know, ultimately, am I just going to be alone? um, I also have, just my own concerns of like, can I even trust myself? Right. So, like, pretty much the earlier part of the day, I spent in this existential void of shadow of a doubt, I guess you could say, and just feeling really low. And so I'm going to share a bit about that. And a lot of you know that I connect really deeply with Venus. Venus is my planet, my love. I connect with Venus through Hathor or vice versa, however you want to look at it. And it's just that particular planet really is my point of like divine light. It is how I connect most deeply with my divine self. And that was really anchored for me. Like I felt that on some level, but it was really anchored, I would say about a year and a half or so ago when I learned of the exaltations, right, of the dignities, of the planetary dignities. And Venus is exalted in Pisces. And my Venus is in Pisces. And to add to that dignity, Venus is also said to rejoice in the fifth house. The fifth house pertains to topics such as creativity, children, sexuality, romance, creative endeavors, and so forth. And my Venus is in Pisces in the fifth house. So not only is it exalted, but it's in its joy, right? So it should be like the happiest thing ever, like the best placement, which it is at times. But I'm starting to see that, again, planetary exaltation is not always a good thing. And sorry, my camera keeps doing this like focusing thing. Hopefully, it doesn't continue with that. So, just about what is coming up for me in addition to all of this. Well, I'll speak on the collective energy. So, as I'm recording this on December 9th, we just had that full moon in Gemini. The full moon was literally exactly conjoined with Mars and pretty much most of the United States, Canada, Europe, and I'm not really good with geography and I don't have the map like with me. So, but I'm in the United States, right? So, in my local experience, right, Mars was occulted by the moon, meaning the moon, it pretty much disappeared behind Mars or disappeared behind the moon and then came out on the other side. So, you can even look at that as Mars being reborn. And this is happening in Gemini. And Mars is also currently retrograde in Gemini. So Mars retrograde is always pointing us into the direction of reflection with our actions, our desires, essentially how we act on our desires. inspiration, and so forth. And with Gemini, of course, there's many different perspectives. There's many different truths. Well, if you have any planets in Gemini, of course, Pisces, Sagittarius, and Virgo, this Mars retrograde is making some sort of dynamic connection, whether it be square, which is a conflict, opposition, which is opposition, or conjunction, which is like a new beginning or some form of alignment for a new beginning. And so, like I said, my Venus is in Pisces. So naturally, it's going to be conflicted by this Mars retrograde. Also, my Mars is in Pisces, like pretty much it's like barely 2 degrees from Venus in my birth chart. And so that was being conflicted as well. So my desires, how I act on my desires, the nature in which, I connect with others, I come into alignment, I love, and all of those things happening in the house of, sexuality, of pleasure, of good fortune. And so Mars in Gemini, again, being occulted by this moon, this full moon, full of Sagittarius intention and the divine intelligence of the sun in Sagittarius, there is that divine truth. Again, that light, the truth that came forth from Scorpio, those Scorpio eclipses, or that Scorpio and Taurus eclipse back in November, and pretty much for the whole Scorpio Taurus eclipse cycle for, this year, or seasons for this year. And so naturally, we are being like washed over, or not washed over, but occulted by our truth. Like we can't ignore our truth in this, in this particular case, wherever Gemini is in your chart, wherever Sagittarius is in your chart, whatever planets you have in those signs, as well as Pisces and Virgo, right? We can't deny our truth. It is like if you saw you know, if you were able to see a live stream or observe it with your own eyes of the moon occulting Mars, I mean, Mars is, of course, so much bigger than the moon, but from our perspective here on Earth, from our experience in the moon being our moon, right? Our closest celestial body, the closest celestial body to us, it was huge. The moon was huge compared to like teeny tiny Mars from our perspective going behind the moon. And it was just like engulfed, like, or it just completely, eclipsed the moon, completely eclipsed Mars. And that is so symbolic. And, when I was sitting with that, I understood it on an astrological level. But I didn't really know how that was going to manifest, for me personally. And I didn't even really actually attempt to try to like figure that out. There was just so much going on, right? There was also Mars in opposition to the sun, which was early this morning at Eastern time. It was like around midnight. So it was probably late last night for some of you all. Or if you're, in Australia, it was late December 9th, right? I think that's how it works for you. Yeah, December 9th. So it was like late Friday night for you all in the Southern Hemisphere, or in Australia at least. I know I have some Australia friends that watch this. So um that was the peak of Mars retrograde cycle. And so there's just so much illumination, so much coming to a head, so much of our divine truth, our desires, and it cannot be ignored. And you guys, I've been ignoring this truth for at least a year. I've been in denial. And it wasn't until literally last night, now that I think about it, it was probably, I'm recording this around, it's like 10 p.m. It was probably like around this time last night when I was like, okay, Portia, you have to face your truth on this. Like, this is not what you are dreaming, fantasizing this out to be. And it had to do with relationship matters. And I have accepted the truth. Last night, I was like, this is the truth. and I'm going to have this conversation or share my truth with this person. And then, you know, that's it, right? I got to move forward. And I have to accept and own my truth because this is not ultimately an alignment. And that created so much discord within my emotional body because I literally made up this. I had this whole vision, this whole idealistic, this is the way it's going to be, this whole fairy tale essentially. And when we think about Venus and Pisces, it can be really that fairy tale, especially I have Neptune. Neptune's pretty close to my Venus and Mars. It's like off by less than 5 degrees, 5 degrees from Venus, 3 degrees from Mars in my chart. And Jupiter, right? We know Jupiter is at 29 degrees in Pisces. So like I said, it's been like the past year, I've been really in this fantasy. And it is now that bubble has been burst for good. It kind of burst a bit. Was it last year or earlier this year? I can't remember. I think it was actually last year, last November with that first eclipse or something like that. So yeah, now it's come around again. And it's like, no, like Urania, my divine self is like, we are breaking this pattern right now. So I ultimately know that I will not repeat this again, but it's very hard. And I'm going to say I'm very scared. So I'm curious. Feel free to share in the comments if you would like, if you having similar experience, if, there was that divine truth, something you probably knew, but you had to fully like embody that truth. And by fully embodying your truth, you had to say no, you had to release, you had to let go, you had to close that tab, right? And so um that is something that I am going to do like within 24 hours. At least have the conversation, right? And I think that's important because then another aspect of myself was another pattern of mine was just like, oh, I'll just let it, dissipate naturally on its own. Like they'll get the message or, I'll just like change. It's like, I'm not really a confrontational person, at least not anymore. I used to be really confrontational and I'm not anymore because I just like, peace and things to be chill. But sometimes when that is the intention, we can tend to like not want to bring things up. And so it lingers, right? And it's still in the space. It needs to be discussed. It needs to be like released in that way, talked about, brought forth, and then, dismissed, released, dissolved. So I did have that conversation with myself as well. I'm like, no, Portia, you need to speak your truth and empower that person, right? Because you're still holding them kind of like hostage in a sense or in bondage because you're not sharing, you're not allowing them to move on and like experience their experience from this, right? So, with all of this said, I will speak on, exaltation not always being a good thing. And it's not always a bad thing because we seek for balance. We seek for harmony. It's not this or that, but it's somewhere in the middle, right? And so, if you're not familiar with planetary exaltation, it is a form of planetary dignity, and planetary dignity is a planetary condition that was practiced or utilized. It's utilized in traditional astrology. And so we have one planetary condition. Wow, my throat is just. One planetary condition is that we all are familiar with is domicile, which is rulership. So domicile essentially, it's one of, so let me see how many. There are four types of dignities in this, and there's tons of ways to um, evaluate if a planet is dignified because we have triplicity, rulership, and all of that stuff. But the main dignity is the domicile, which is like this is the sign's home. This is the sign, the sign, um, the planet rules the sign essentially, right? It's called domicile. And then we have exile or detriment, which is essentially this planet is in the sign in opposition to its domicile or its home. And so when a planet is in domicile, its domicile sign, it has all of its resources, its comfort. It's at home, right? It's at your home. Like you're in your home, your cozy place. You feel good, hopefully. Um, and you have all your resources. When a planet is in exile or detriment, they are as far away from home as they can be. They don't have any resources. They are in a foreign land. And this is almost can be kind of like punishing in a way, if you think about the context of ancient times, like, there was no internet and stuff like that, of course. So, if you're far away from home, like far away from your resources, it is really uncomfortable and it's a bit scary, right? And people would get punished by being, sent away from home, by being like put into exile, right? So then we also have fall and exaltation. So, or did I say I'm sorry, the exile or detriment is essentially the sign that is opposite of the planet's domicile. So for example, the sun is at home in Leo, its domicile is Leo, and its exile or detriment is in Aquarius, right? The sun and Aquarius are opposite signs, and it's always the opposite signs, right? So the moon's domicile is Cancer, moon's exile is Capricorn, okay? Venus's domicile is Taurus and Libra. Venus's exile is Scorpio and Aries, right? So, um, then we have fall and exaltation. So the fall, planet's fall, so the sign that they're in their fall in means that it is essentially depressed. It's at a low vibration. It's not happy at all. It's depressed. And then a planet that is in its exaltation is literally like in high, it's exalted. It's like, I always think of like it being on a pedestal or just like in high honor. It's at a high vibration, right? So the planet is able to achieve its intention or its virtue, live out its virtue when it's exalted and at the highest vibration versus when it's in its fall, which is at the lowest vibration. And so, just to share again with those examples, the sun is in fall, and it's okay. It's probably easier for me to say that exaltation in the fall. Okay. And you'll see that they're opposites as well. So, the sun is in its exaltation in Aries, right? So, there is an ability to, like, if we think about the sun and the inspiration and the warmth and the fire and the passion, putting that in Aries, that's just like amplified, right? But then the fall of the sun is in Libra. So the sun essentially is depressed in Libra because, like, the sun, we can say the sun is I mean, it's the center of our solar system, right? So it's just like it's me, like everything orbits me, and like here's my creative endeavors, and it's just like a lot of confidence. And so when the sun is placed in a sign like Libra, there's fairness, there's equality, right? So it has to, like, balance itself. Like it has to balance its energy and like not always look out for the self, but look out for like, how's everyone doing here? And then the moon's exaltation is Taurus, and its fall is Scorpio, and then Venus exaltation is Pisces, and Venus's fall is in Virgo. And I'm going to go over actually the exaltations for the planets, so you can get an example. But, as I said, it's not as I've expressed, right? So I have a Venus, my Venus is in Pisces and it's in the fifth house. So let me just briefly explain the house, the joys of the planets. And basically, each planet has a place within the houses, the areas of life, right? So those 12 houses in your chart, each planet has a place of joy. Um, and so there, and this is we're focusing here on the seven traditional planets including sun and moon. So the seven traditional planets have a joy, a place where they are considered to rejoice, to be their joy in within a house and on the wheel. Wow. I hope this makes sense. Actually, I might share this so you can get a visual because why not? Um, let's see here. Thank you for your patience because I'm stumbling all over the place. All right, that's perfection. Is this it? Oh, do I not have that? Oh, I do. Okay. Haha. All right, I'm gonna share my screen just so you all can see. Just get rid of this thing. Oops. Share screen. Okay. I want to do more of like sharing the screen and just sharing things like this with these videos. So you can all get visuals of what I'm talking about because I know a lot of you, like myself, are visual learners. Okay, so if you see within the will, so these are the houses here, the area of life, and they're actually in traditional Hellenistic astrology, they're considered to be the 12 places, right? And these are the topics, okay? And this is from the traditional perspective. And so you see here, it's numbered 1 through 12. And then we have some planetary glyphs here. So these planetary glyphs essentially are the places that the planets rejoice in, that these specific planets rejoice in. So Mercury rejoices in the first house. So if you have Mercury in your first house, it is dignified, right? It rejoices there, so it's really happy. And then the moon is in its joy or rejoices in the third house, which is considered to be the house of the goddess in traditional astrology. And so then Venus rejoices in the fifth house here, which makes sense when you think about this: children, pregnancy, pleasure, sex, good fortune. Mars rejoices in the house of the sixth house, which is considered bad fortune, but like injuries, illnesses. So basically, Mars has that willpower, has that drive to really keep moving, like persevere, like when it comes to injuries and illnesses and even like that work grind. But also Mars can, is also corresponds to injuries as well. All right. So acute injuries. And so then we have the sun rejoices in the ninth house, which is the house of the god. And then Jupiter, it rejoices in the 11th house, which is the house of good spirit. And so we have here friends, alliance groups, like, just people coming together, right? And then we have Saturn, it rejoices in the 12th house, which is the house of traditionally bad spirits. And so then you have loss, sickness, enemies, confinement. That confinement really speaks to me when it comes to like Saturn rejoicing here, because it's like Saturn can isolate and really bring in the coldness of some sort of structure, because like there's also with the 12th house, there's also the retreat, the aspect of retreat. But then I like with the 12th house too, there's the aspect of the unconscious realm, right? And so that unconscious realm can be like, if you're really in that space, it could be isolating in a way too. And there's also other reasons for this, these associations that pertain to, sect. Like these are all the night planets down here, are nocturnal planets. These are the diurnal planets, and then Mercury kind of plays both sides, which makes sense. For being the first house, because you always have the eastern horizon. The ascendant will be somewhere in the first house. So the first house tends to mark the horizon, where you have like obviously the night or below the horizon and then above the horizon in one space. And so Mercury, it goes like it's the one that goes very freely and quickly between the realms, right? Or both worlds, the underworld and the, above the underworld. All right. So yeah, that was my half-assed description of that. I just wanted to give you a visual. But so my point is that I'm just going to go through the planets and their signs of exaltation and how it could be good, but then how it can also lean towards, the quote unquote bad, right? And so really it's like we want to find balance within I guess like the main thing is like the energies desire balance, like we desire harmony, we desire alignment, right? Finding that center point. But of course, we are here in the earth, within the earth experience. And so it's like it's always that duality, right? It's a little bit of this, a little bit of that, like to have that perfection, to have that alignment. It's like I feel on earth it would get kind of boring if we stay there like all the time in that space of alignment. So it's interesting to like be in alignment, and then we are challenged to expand and to grow by like, kind of swaying a bit in one way or the other. Okay, so as I said before, the sun is exalted in Aries. So in its natural state, right? Or before I even get into this, I just want to say that um when you think about the dignity, right, of these planets, the first thing I do, right, because I know with modern astrology, some astrologers don't really like to use dignity because it does give you like good, bad, right? And the way I tend to look at it is like just purely looking at the virtue of a planet, right? So the sun's virtue is to inspire, is to, it is divine intelligence. And so it's there to just really inspire and ignite that creative will, right? And so when you think about the 12 signs, what sign is it going to have the most ease in achieving that virtue, of living that virtue? Makes sense. The sun in Aries. Aries is like very strong within itself, very confident, ready to take action, courageous. It's really inspired. It's like striking that match. Let's go. Right. So the sun, it makes sense that the sun would be exalted in Aries. But then on the flip side, it can go too far where, there's an overpowered ego, right? And it becomes like very like self-centered. And as I'm going through this, like this isn't to say people that have sun in Aries are like self-centered or they have an overpowered ego. It can just go to that extreme, right? And it's never again black and white. There's always other contributing factors, which is why, yes, it's not always good or bad, right? It's somewhere in between, or there's in some gray area. So I just want to speak to that. And so then we have the moon in Taurus, right? The moon is exalted in Taurus. And as we know, the moon loves to move through the emotions, it moves through all of its phases. And it's just like, let me just flow and like feel it all. And Taurus is like the most grounded sign of the zodiac. So it makes sense that the moon will be exalted in Taurus because it has that space of safety, of comfort, right? It's very solid and secure, but it can be taken too far by, someone having the moon in Taurus can create an emotional fortress where like it's like this is my safe space and no one can get in, right? Or I need this and that for my comfort, and it's just like a very fixed closed off kind of vibe and experience, right? So, of course, we want to find that balance. And then Mercury. So, Mercury is wanting to connect, wanting to really, is really good at looking at all the details, wanting to network, wanting to find that common point, and find some element of the truth, right? Like wanting to look at all the perspectives to find that center of truth, right? Or try to find that point of truth. So there's this keen insight, right? And so being able to focus really inwardly or focus very strongly inwardly makes sense for Mercury to be exalted in Virgo, because Virgo is the healer, or Virgo wants to just like, fix things to get them working. And like I can even see Mercury being like very hands-on, very strong student, wanting to learn, being able to retain that, right? So it makes sense that Mercury would be exalted in Virgo, and it's also its domicile, so that's nice. And but it can be taken too far by just like over analyzing, overthinking, over criticizing. The hypochondriac is a perfect example where it's like it's focusing too much on the wrong things or the bad things or like the heavy, shadowy things, and not focusing on like not balancing that out by like, implementing practices to bring in more of the positive, or like focusing on the positive as well. So that is that exaltation. And then Venus and Pisces. So Venus essentially wants to love, also wants to connect, to harmonize, to bind, to merge, right? Did I say to love? And it makes sense for it to be exalted in Pisces, because Pisces is like source, essentially. It's everything, all the signs and all the 12 archetypes in one, wanting to experience it all, right? Wanting to just merge into like oneness. And so it makes sense that Venus, would be exalted and has all the resources to do so in Pisces. However, it could be taken too far by blindly looking past red flags, people pleasing, um, even just like getting caught up in just like this idealistic fantasy, like the perfection. This is everything that I'm guilty of. And so it's good again to have the balance. And so then Mars is exalted in Capricorn, right? And so Mars has that strong desire, strong willpower, wants independence and freedom, very courageous. And with Mars in Capricorn, Mars is able to really inherit that disciplined nature of Capricorn, right? So it's in a space where there's like a plan, there's a method. Okay, we have this blueprint. Let's go. Like, let's go for it. Let's do it. And Mars is able to successfully achieve its virtue, right? Achieve independence, freedom, whatever it's wanting to acquire. But that could be taken too far. It can be very rigid. It can get very just like what's the word? I can never say this word. It's like a tongue twister for me. Author authoritarian author I cannot say it. Authoritarian. That's not the right way to say it, but you know what I'm saying. It could just be very dominating, very like mastermind control, right? So there's that. And so then Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. And this, of course, Jupiter wants to expand, wants to nurture, um, or I don't know if Jupiter wants to expand, and just like it's very fertile, it's very abundant. And so in Cancer, it makes sense because Cancer is like it's experiencing all the phases, and it's like the celestial body that corresponds to nurture and to support and just like nourishing for growth, right? So Jupiter and Cancer are both focused on nourishing, or have that likeness, that affinity. And so it makes sense that it would, be exalted in Cancer. However, and there's a lot of optimism and good feeling with Jupiter. So that's like really good for Cancer, right? And so, but it can go too far where there is a lack of boundaries, And there's just like no definition, no groundedness to like really, you know, um, have a focus on how much we expand or like what we're growing. And just like it could be yeah, just like overabundance, like overkill with that. And then finally, Saturn is exalted in Libra. And Saturn, Saturn is like, okay, here's the law, here's order, here are the rules, right? And that works in Libra because Libra's trying to find the fairness and equality for everyone. But then on the flip side, it could be really hard, to stand for oneself, to find your voice, to find your point of authority, to, yeah, it's just like, no, this is actually what's right. Let's stop. Like, it could be hard because you might tend to people please again in a way where it's like, okay, I'm trying to please both sides. I'm trying to like, create some sort of like fairness and center, but then you end up losing yourself, right? You end up, um, yeah. So going to that extreme. And so it's interesting that when I like really wrote down and noted all of the ways that it could be just kind of leaning in the other direction of like the bad, I guess you could say. It's like needing the balance of the other sign, right? That's in opposition to that sign. So with Libra, it would be a little bit more of Aries, right? Where it's like, okay, let's bring in a bit more of the self. Let's bring a little bit more of the courage and the assertiveness of Aries, right? When we're trying to make these like rules and laws essentially, because I see that here in the United States where it's like, you know, especially with the Democrats specifically, where it's like they ideally are trying to please like they're trying to please the people and their what do you call it? Like the special interest of the lobbyists, right? So, and they're trying to play both sides and it's just messy and like nothing's getting done and they need to be more assertive. They need to actually stand up for what's right. Or like we as a people need to stand up for what's right and stop being like wishy-washy, right? So that's just a kind of some examples of exaltation and why it is not always a good thing, but it's not a bad thing either. So thank you for watching this. I hope this really made sense here. And I will be sharing more videos like this. Definitely feel free to comment. I really have been appreciating your comments and just holding space for me as I share and, get a bit more vulnerable with you guys because sometimes I'm like, who cares? But I know that I actually enjoy when, people that I connect with, whether it be astrologers, teachers, whoever, when they share their own personal story and kind of bring that into the context of what they're discussing, it just makes it more like relatable, I would say. So thank you again. I hope you all are having a good weekend and I will talk to you all again soon. Take care.